Every company you can think of is marketing studio-quality headphones. Audeze, AKG, Beyerdynamic, Audio-Technica, Sennheiser, Neumann, and countless Chinese companies with spurious products are shilling and selling and marketing studio-quality headphones. No matter how studio the studio title, each headphone from each of these companies has its own particular sound signature, for better or for worse. You could go with the affordable route and buy a DT880 for $200 and get good results. Or you could get carried away by the Audeze LCD1 hype and buy into the laughably professional quality headphone. A few months ago, a new competitor decided to jump into the fight. I'm talking about the Austrian Audio Hi-X55, a close-back, around-ear, studio monitoring headphone with some refreshing ideas. The Hi-X55 retails for about $300 and is currently found on Amazon and a few online retailers. I bought a demo unit with a hefty discount. Is the X55 a worthwhile purchase? Well, yes, I think it might be. I am not going to waste time giving you the history of Austrian Audio. Go to their website and read up about them. But the summary is this. Austrian Audio makes really high-end microphones. All of their gear is made in, well, Austria. They have a unique aesthetic design, which I am very much in favor of. Austrian Audio released the X55 and its smaller brother, the X50, a few months ago. Both headphones use 44mm drivers, which were designed in-house by Austrian Audio. This is not a licensing deal with anyone. Austrian Audio is very proud of their own technology. I cannot tell if the two headphones use the exact same drivers or if there is some difference between them. The X50 is an on-ear design and the X55 is over-ear. Both are 25 ohm with an SPL of 118 decibels. In other words, these headphones are really easy to drive. The X55 is available in the United States, however, the X50 is not yet available. Most companies tell you what their products are supposed to do. Most of these claims turn out to be bogus lies. The alternative is to either tell the truth, which is rare, or do not say anything at all, or just give vague descriptions. Austrian Audio barely says anything about the X55. The only claim I could find on their website is that the headphones were made for, quote, today's contemporary music production. I have no idea what that means. I read 3 reviews, which I assume were courtesy of some free X55 headphones to the reviewers. Those reviews were exceedingly short and vague as well, but they all seemed to paint a picture that gave me an idea of what to expect. Evidently, the X55 is designed to help produce rock, pop, EDM, and hip-hop music. All of these genres need bass and vocals. All of them have quite different emphasis throughout the frequency range. Theoretically, a neutral headphone would accommodate when you're trying to serve so many different genres of music. What I therefore expected to hear was neutral sound, maybe even flat sound signature. What I actually got was rather different, and pleasantly so. For this video, I decided to test the X55 by itself and not compare it to other headphones. Comparisons will happen later. The reason I chose to do this will be provided at the end of the video. For the initial tests, I plugged the X55 into 3 sources. I used the Monolith Liquid Spark connected to my Shit Modi. I also used the Audeze HUD MX2 amp DAC with its jumper caps removed, and I used my cherished Cowan Plenu P2. I played music over Amazon Music HD and my FLAC library. Fast, deep, accurate, tight. That's what I would say about the bass on this headphone. The X55 is not designed for bass heads. It's not designed for those who love the Harman curve. This is not Beats, Bose, Sony bass response, or anything similar like it. Sub-bass rumble is present, audible, clear, and fast. In Mountains by Hans Zimmer, the sub-bass rumble is easily heard at the beginning of the song, but it stays in the background like a concrete layer you can see through the tiles on the floor. Sub-bass and mid-bass have excellent separation. Transience is quick too. When the crescendo hits in the middle of the song, the organ's tone is clear, precise, and incredibly fast. It does not linger, does not overwhelm the other instruments, does not sound bloated. There is some excellent clarity throughout this song. Instruments are separate left to right. You can hear group sets, and there is hard separation amongst most of the instruments. Most headphones will over-accentuate the organ in this song, making it destroy every other instrument, but not so with the X55. The organ was so clear, clean, and fast that it felt like listening to a remix of the song. I have rarely heard the organ in this precise fashion, and I honestly cannot remember the last time any other headphone presented this song in the way the X50 does presented. Conquer by Overwork is also a very good song to test mid-bass. There's electronic sound effects and a few different types of drums. Mid-bass impact is fast, precise, with quick transients. There is hard separation between the bass and electronic sound effects. Nothing sounds harsh or distorted. All instruments are crystal clear. Bird Island by Kodo is another good example of bass reproduction. Kodo is known to use various drums that have vastly different sound signatures. In Bird Island, the X55 presented small, fast drums that sounded like they were about 5 feet from me. I heard the clacking of wooden sticks clearly separated from the other instruments. I heard the big barrel drums as if they were 10 feet away. These drums had slightly longer decay than the smaller ones, and obviously had a different tonality. The various instruments did not meld together. When I wanted to concentrate on just the flutes, I could hear them without struggle. In fact, there were 2 different types of flutes, and I could choose to pay attention to either one. Their separate sounds were quite apparent. In Pure Water by Mustard and Migos, the X55 shows that it reaches down to the sub-bass, but it does not emphasize it. Sub-bass and mid-bass do not meld, but the sub-bass rumble typically recorded into hip-hop songs is not prevalent with the X55. Instead, I heard more of the mid-bass thump than the sub-bass reverberation. I played other hip-hop songs like New Patek, Uproar, Reel It In, and Yes Indeed. The result was always the same. Sub-bass was a little south of neutral for hip-hop songs. In other words, I could hear the sub-bass rumble, but just could not feel it. The transients was fast, maybe a little too fast to do those songs much justice. On the other hand, mid-bass impact was excellent. I heard the thump of the drums. The short story is that this headphone does not bloat bass. There is some excellent sub-bass and mid-bass separation and very good mid-bass slam. Bass instruments are clear without distortion, and every bass instrument I heard had very fast transients, the type that rivals planar magnetic drivers. The mids are crystal clear. There is a slight bump in the mids. This was apparent in every song I played. Acoustic guitars had natural decay with accurate timbre. Electric guitars were clear. Pianos sounded natural, and vocals were forward by 2 steps, clear and distinct. In Why Am I Like This by Orla Gartland, I appreciated the nuances in the mix, things I had not noticed with many other headphones. The acoustic guitar was separate from her tonality, never interfering. Orla has natural grain and sibilance that is recorded into the music. The X55 presented some of that grain and sibilance. The sibilance was not harsh, but was just a few decibels above neutral. Around 2 minutes and 44 seconds into the song, I heard Orla's voice, the drums, electric and acoustic guitars, and an echo of another vocalist in the right ear cup, as if that vocalist was several feet behind. This is a detail that has escaped my notice when using many other headphones. In Want You Back by Haim, the primary vocalist retains her natural sibilance without any harshness. The 2 backup vocalists are clear and distinct, their individual tonalities separate from each other. The piano, drums, and guitar all sounded neutral and natural with proper timbre. The vocals were about 2 steps ahead of the entire mix. When all the instruments played and the backup vocalist sang in unison, I could still hear the different tonalities of each vocalist. The primary vocalist was dead center, and each backup vocalist was either in the right or left ear cup. This is very difficult to achieve. The majority of headphones I have heard and tested fail to reproduce this type of separation and detail. In Superposition by Young the Giant, the bass guitar was clear, audible, with fast transients. The primary male vocalist was front and center, about 2 steps ahead of the instruments. There was no grain or harshness to his voice. This song, for some strange reason, causes some headphones to fall apart. More often than not, the headphones will muddy the vocals or distort the bass guitar, but the X55 did neither. The vocals remained clear and separate from the instruments. The bass guitar was clear, tight, and did not distort. In Firefall by Bear, the primary male vocalist was dead center and sounded like he was about 5 feet from me. His voice was warm, smooth, and exceptionally clear. The backup vocalists were audible as well. Often, those backup vocalists melded with the primary vocalist, but the X55 kept the two tonalities separate, though I had to pay attention to hear that difference. The drums were fast and accurate and did not interfere with the mids. The guitar sounded clear and had fast, natural decay. Male vocals sound just a little bit smoother on the X55 than female vocals do. The X55 does reproduce the grain and sibilance of vocalists, as long as that information is recorded into the songs. Headphones like the LCD1 and NDH20 roll off and smooth out a lot of that detail. And headphones like the DT990, 1770, and HD800S accentuate the treble to an uncomfortable degree. The X55, on the other hand, keeps things very well controlled, yet still provides vocal sparkle a lot of people may enjoy. I had a huge smile on my face when I tested the treble response. I was actually prepared to cringe. Hearing some of the sibilance of female vocalists, I expected the mid and upper treble region to be harsh. Thankfully, the actual result was far from what I thought would happen. In Scherzo for X-Wings, the horns and brass were clear, distinct, and separate from the other instruments. They had their characteristic energy. Yet, these instruments were not harsh or ear-piercing. They had natural decay. I could not hear individual instruments, but group sets were distinct, separate from one another. I could hear one set of instruments in one ear cup while a different played in the other. There was no melding. In Flight from the City by Johan Johansson, the piano had one of the most natural, neutral tonalities I have heard from any headphone. Some headphones will bloat the bassier keys, while others will simply distort everything the piano does. The X55, on the other hand, did not overemphasize the bass notes. Those notes died off very quickly, did not sound muddy, and did not interact with the other notes. The cello also sounded smooth and clear, and there was excellent separation between it and the piano. There was no harshness or distortion at all. Take 5 by the Dave Brubeck Quartet also sounded incredibly clear. I could hear the piano in the right ear cup and the saxophone dead center. The saxophone did not get harsh or ear-piercing. Its tonality was natural, its timbre accurate. While all of this happened, I heard the drums in the left ear cup softly playing, the hi-hat ringing gently. There was such excellent separation among all the instruments that I was able to pinpoint an instrument to listen to and could easily ignore all the others. In short, the X55 renders some of the very best treble I have ever heard. The treble is mostly neutral. I could not say if it is actually flat. In fact, I do not think anything about the frequency response on this headphone is flat. Some instruments might sound a few decibels emphasized, while others will sound exactly like they should. But at no point did it appear that the X55 made any instrument harsh or fatiguing. Detail retrieval is one of those things that you either care for or don't care at all. There are plenty of headphones and amp decks that steamroll over details. The Chord Mojo, LCD1, and DH20 are just a few examples that get a ton of unwarranted hype as having the detail they don't actually have. The X55 is no detail monster. Forget the idea that this thing can compete with something like the Focal Clear or HD800S. It simply cannot. But the X55 does far better than a whole lot of headphones I have heard. Details in songs pops without sounding artificial. The sharp intake of breath by primary vocalists will be heard, though won't be shoved in your face. The creaking of the pianist bench in Flight from the City was easily audible, but not emphasized. The way the hi-hat was hit in All Blues by Miles Davis sounded different. In other words, I heard slightly different tonality if the drummer hit the cymbals on the top or the side, and I could tell where the strike was made. The overall presentation of these details was quite enjoyable. Nothing ever seemed forced, but nothing was truly natural either. Typically when you listen at a concert, these types of details will not make it to your ears. Your distance, placement, and room size affect that. So does the ambient sound. Would you be able to tell where the drummer smacked the cymbal when listening at a live performance? Well, probably not. This is why I say the X55 is not a natural presentation of details, but it's fun anyway. As for a more quantitative details test, well, I do that as well. I used the song New Light by Kazuki. This song has layers of details, from children playing in the background to the sound of wind, dry grass rustling, footsteps, and a piano, and synth sound effects. I count the number of steps I hear within the first 60 seconds of the song. So far, the king of detail is still the Focal Clear, which presented 16 footsteps in the first 45 seconds of the song. No other headphone has ever come close. On the X55, I heard 13 to 14 footsteps within the first 60 seconds. That is impressive. Very impressive. For comparison, the LCD1 reproduced 6 footsteps. The HD660S and 6XX reproduced about 6 to 7 footsteps. The Hi-Fi Man Sundara reproduced 11 to 12 footsteps. Some people will not like the X55 sound signature. Just like with anything else in life, personal preference and taste should be taken into account. What happens when you use EQ on the X55? Does it distort? Does it actually respond to the equalization? To answer this, I plugged the X55 into my Cowan P2, an excellent DAP that has a multitude of EQ presets. Every single Cowan player has this baked in and provides the best EQ settings of any device from any manufacturer I have ever heard. I'm happy to say that the X55 does take EQ rather well. I applied the X-Bass, rap, metal, dance, blues, hip-hop, hall, maestro, pop, and club effects out of the many other options available. Each preset sounded different. For example, with the hip-hop preset, that demure, quiet sub-bass rumble in Mountains became a huge torrent of sub-bass rumble, the type that bass heads everywhere would love. Switch to the pop preset, and that rumble is much more controlled. Pop songs by Vic and Gab also had clear alterations with EQ. Skipping from the various options, the X55 was always able to change the performance as required. If I wanted thinner vocals, I'd switch the metal EQ. If I wanted more bass reverberation and thicker mids, I would switch to the club EQ. If I wanted more mid-bass emphasis and recessed mids, I'd switch to the blues EQ. Highly processed, computer-generated music like the type from Wolf Club also sounded different on the X55 with the various EQ settings. I tried 6 different settings as I listened to their tracks, and the X55 obliged. I also tested EQ on my computer. I plugged in my Sound Blaster G6 DAC and launched the Sound Blaster Connect application. This app has a very useful EQ window with many presets and the option to draw your own adjustments. Every adjustment I tried had a noticeable difference on the X55, but with mixed results. The deep sub-bass rumble I was able to recreate on the Cowan DAP was something I could not really recreate on the Sound Blaster app. I also plugged the X55 into my hifi Zen DAC, which has a bass boost function. That boost did have an effect, which brought up the sub-bass presence and created longer decay in the bass overall. Mids, however, remained clear. This test was not to find which EQ was the most pleasant. That is an individual assessment. Instead, the test was to determine if the X55 could in fact show the changes in the EQ presets. Some people will completely dislike the use of EQ, others will love it, and I think most will find 1 or 2 that work best for any given audio track. In this regard, the X55 did just fine. Being a closed-back design, one would expect a rather intimate soundstage from the X55, but that is not what I heard. In fact, the X55 soundstage is about average. This in itself is a positive sign. Some open-back headphones struggle to achieve even this much. The quick transients of bass and slight mids emphasis help give the impression that the X55 is average to above average in soundstage. Depending on your recording, your mileage will vary. In comparison, the open-back $400 LCD1 sounds like a close-back headphone and has noticeably less soundstage than the X55. The HD6XX and 660S sound more intimate than the X55 as well. The stock Vocal Erupt sounds downright claustrophobic. The Hi-Fi Man Sundara has slightly wider soundstage, and the Hi-Fi Man Diva has even wider soundstage than the Hi-Fi Man Sundara. So, to summarize, the X55 has noticeably more soundstage than the LCD1, the HD6XX, and the HD660S, but slightly less than the Hi-Fi Man Sundara. There is not much to say about the build quality. It is, in fact, superb. Austrian Audio used premium materials, and it shows. The X55 is made mostly of aluminum. The padding is superb, soft, and supple. There is actual memory foam in the headband and ear pads. Yet, the X55 is not heavy. It is one of the most comfortable headphones I have ever worn. The ear cups actually sit around my ears. My ears do not touch the drivers, do not get bent from the ear pads. I wore the X55 for 4 hours straight without any discomfort at all. In fact, my ears got only slightly warm after that lengthy listening period. The built-in comfort is superlative at any price. Imagine something like the $2,000 Hi-Fi Man HE1000. Its build is shaky at best. The $400 LCD one is plastic and has small sponge-like ear pads. The $1,500 HD800S does not have much clamping force. And here you have the much cheaper X55 that does what those other more expensive headphones should have done. Okay, so now the reason why I did not compare the X55 to other headphones in this video directly. As I said, those comparisons will happen in the future. The reason I concentrated entirely on the X55 here is because of a few comments online about these headphones. Evidently, Oratory1990 measured the X55 a few months ago. He posted those measurements on Twitter, and some people were not impressed. And to be honest, looking at the graph, I can understand why people might get freaked out. Oratory1990 is regarded as a reputable person for measurements, but beyond that, I don't know. His opinion, as shared in forums, is that the X55 is good in everything except the sound. Those who were eagerly awaiting the X55 read Oratory's feedback and then said their bubble had been popped. Well, I think it's always a good idea to have your expectations tempered by reality. And Oratory1990 is entitled to his opinion regarding what gear he tests. A sound signature he hates, you may love, and vice versa. What I want to emphasize is that Oratory's measurements may look scary, but the headphones do not perform that way. There is no jarring transition from one frequency range to another. There is no peakiness or harshness in the treble. There is no unusual resonance or distortion. Yes, the X55 has a sound that not everyone will like, but to rely entirely upon measurements is a foolish thing to do. Measurements are only part of the story. Sometimes those graphs are accurate, sometimes they are not, and regardless, your music and audio setup affects what you hear. I wanted to provide a video specifically about the X55 so that you could have more information than what the handful of so-called reviews provide, and hopefully that's what you got here. Things are not perfect with the X55. No gear is really perfect. In the case of the X55, the cable is something people will gripe about. It uses a proprietary locking mechanism. Some AKG headphones use something similar, but I can't be sure. Austrian Audio only provides one 10-foot cable, which is simply much too long for portable use. The cable itself is not made of anything special. Although I expect that it will not break with careful use, it is also not better than the ones you can find on Amazon. There is some plastic on this headphone, namely, the ear cup shell is plastic but has metal on the protruding top section where the Austrian Audio logo is. I wish they had simply made the entire ear cup of metal. Thin aluminum is not particularly heavy. The ear pads are also proprietary. They are incredibly plush, some of the largest rectangular pads you can find on the market. But the ear pads are attached to a piece of plastic with 12 notches. When attaching the ear pads, you have to press in 12 different spots around the ear pad to seat them in properly. In my opinion, all of these issues would be difficult to accept for more expensive headphones, but I have to put the X55's shortcomings in context of its price bracket. Further, I simply can find no fault with the ear pads or headband padding. These are some of the most comfortable plush cushions I have ever worn. The cable locking mechanism is proprietary, not the jack, so if you can find a cable with a long enough jack, it might work with the X55. As for the build, well, it's good, really good. It's not a plastic joke like the LCD one, nor is it the unnecessarily heavy and bulky NDH20. Consequently, the combination of plastic and metal on the X55 is a fair middle ground. I was pleasantly surprised by the X55. It is a fantastic headphone. It has superlative build and comfort. It has a unique sound signature with clean, crisp reproduction. It has a mids-forward presentation that is neither thick nor thin. Vocals sound natural and full. Mid-bass is neutral, though sub-bass could use some emphasis. Treble is well extended without harshness. The X55 has the ability to separate instruments, vocals, and bring out details. For a closed-back, portable, sturdy, and clean, clear-sounding headphone, the Austrian Audio Hi-X55 is a great option. It's cheaper than a lot of the hyped products and offers more of what those guys promised but did not deliver. In future videos, we will compare the X55 to the NDH20, the LCD1, the Yamaha HPH MT8, and the Allo S4R.